Hi guys, and in this video we will be going through the pedestrian crossing signs of Europe. There are 7 types of pedestrian crossing signs I have found in Europe. You have ones that have dashes, you have ones that have a single straight line, others which have zebra crossings, you have ones that have a belt, others which have a hat, and you also have ones that have a yellow triangle, but you can also have some that are in the shape of a yellow diamond. For me, the most distinctive pedestrian crossing sign is Poland's. This country will only have one straight thick line, and you can't find this in any other country. Iceland is also very unique, and it is the only country with the yellow triangle. Also, Ireland is the only pedestrian sign that is shaped like a diamond, and that is also yellow. But be aware, the UK does not have pedestrian crossing signs, so if you do see diamond-shaped signs, it could only be Ireland. Let's begin with pedestrian crossing signs that have dashes. And these 3 countries, I was not able to find any zebra crossing pedestrian signs. And this is Greece, Austria and Belgium. Austria has a hat with shoes, Belgium looks like some kind of Roblox thing going on, and Greece has no hats. You can also get pedestrian crossings with hats. And a good way to separate countries with hats is by looking at how many zebra crossings there are. For example, if it is only 7 zebra crossings, it can only be Switzerland. Austria only has dashes, Bulgaria has 4 zebras, but be aware that they can also have a hatless man with 5 zebras, and also Czechia and North Norway at times can have 5 zebras and the hat too. The number of zebras varies depending on the country, and it ranges from 3 to 8. If it is 7, it can only be Switzerland. If it is 8, it can only be Andorra or Spain. You can also get a 6 zebra, which is much rarer, and you can find that on the Faroe Islands. Also, be aware that you can also have 5 zebras in the Faroe Islands too, and that's identical to the Denmark one. For 3 zebras, it's usually like the Russian or some of the Baltic countries, as well as Ukraine. So that includes Estonia, Lithuania, Belarus, Russia, and Ukraine. For 4 zebras, I was only able to find it in these countries, which are Bulgaria, Norway, but mostly South Norway, and Sweden. The vast majority of the pedestrian crossing signs are 5 zebras. Be aware of overlaps or country borders. For 3 zebras, you have to look at the body stripes mostly and whether the head is attached. If the head is attached, it can only be Estonia. The next 2 are quite difficult to separate. But if you look carefully or in good enough detail, the Ukraine pedestrian crossing sign is a lot less bulky. It's a lot more skinnier than the Lithuania and Russia sign. But also, another good thing to look out for is the stripe, what separates the body from the leg. And in Ukraine, the actual line is actually thicker than the Lithuania and Russia. For 4 zebra types, you can be in 3 countries: Norway, Bulgaria or Sweden. For Bulgaria, it is the only 4 zebra that has a hat. For Norway and Sweden, the main difference is the stride length. In Sweden, you have a character that does a longer stride. You always have both sexes, but also the shoes is a main factor because in Norway they have no shoes. It's more like they've got rectangular feet. You find this Norway sign mostly in southern Norway, but you can find it throughout Norway. Right, now we get into the real details. If you look at all these signs, you can notice that there's this white line going through the person's body, and let's just call this the belt. Looking at the position of the belt can help you eliminate or confirm certain countries. For example, Hungary have a low belt because it's right in line of where the legs and the body meet. And you also have Portugal, which is a high belt, and it's much higher up the body. And then the remainder are waist belts. And those countries are Croatia, Germany, Luxembourg, Montenegro, North Macedonia and Slovakia. Be aware that Luxembourg can also not have a belt. And another thing to add is you can have the high belt present in Madeira, the Portuguese island near Africa, but be aware, in Madeira, you do occasionally see some Spanish pedestrian signs. In terms of looking at the normal waist belts, the main difference is whether they got breadsticks or not. And what I mean by breadsticks is the legs are a lot more thicker, a lot more cylinder shaped in comparison to the thinner legs that are not as rounded at the bottom of the feet. And if they appear to be breadstick-like with waist belts, it can only be Croatia, Montenegro and North Macedonia. If it's just normal but without the breadsticks, it's either Germany, Luxembourg or Slovakia. Another thing to look out for is the actual head shape, how far the head is away from the body, but also the shape of the legs. If the head is very large with 5 zebras, it can either be Denmark or Finland. Finland is different to Denmark because it has the arm pointing forwards, but also its legs is touching the zebra crossing, whereas the one in Denmark is not. Be aware you can find the exact same Danish pedestrian sign in the Faroe Islands, but mostly in the Faroe Islands it is 6. So if it doesn't have a big head, it can either have a small head far from the body or a very small head far from the body. If you look at Albania, Romania, Slovenia, and Serbia, you can notice that the head is slightly larger than the ones in Malta, Italy, and San Marino. The breadstick legs look a lot thicker than the Italy, Malta and San Marino ones too. But that might be quite difficult to tell whilst playing Battle Royale, but if you've got time, a non-timed NMPZ or a no moving, this may become very useful. Another important factor to look at for 5 zebras is the actual arms and posture. If we look at Turkey, the first thing you realise is the head is quite near to the body but not touching, and they have bigger hands than the other two, but also they don't have that white outline on the legs. For France or Monaco, the head is even closer to the body. And it's like it's a really, really small neck if you look carefully. So when we look at the Netherlands, bit of a smaller head, but it's quite hard to tell. But the head is not as close into the body as the French pedestrian sign. And also the legs are a lot thinner too, and so are the arms. Another thing to look out for is whether the head is attached with the neck. And I found this in 2 countries. The first was Luxembourg. Like mentioned before, they do have the belts, but also you can find this sign, which appears to be a view from the side of the stickman, and the head appears to be more oval shaped. Whereas if you look at the Bulgaria one, which has 5 pedestrian crossing signs, you have a good view for the front, the head is more circular, and the back foot is not completely on the black zebra. Like mentioned before, there's also a 4 zebra crossing Bulgaria with a hat. Another distinctive pedestrian crossing sign that tends to be unnoticed is the Latvian pedestrian crossing sign. It is completely different to Estonia and Lithuania because it has the 5 zebras. Another good way to separate it from other countries is actually how short the body is compared to the legs. How the legs appear a lot longer, but also there is that one stripe that separates the right leg to the body. Right, so since we've introduced ourselves to all the pedestrian crossing signs, it is time to look at how you can use them to separate similar countries. And first of all, you have Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway and Sweden. Iceland, of course, is the only one with the yellow triangle. For Denmark and Finland, you can only have 5. Be aware, you can have 5 in Norway, but it is northern Norway when you see the person with the hat and the shoes. And this is the only one I found with a hat in Scandinavia. So if you see 5 zebras with a hat and you're in some Nordic country or in Scandinavia, it can only be Norway. And the 4 zebras is either Norway, Sweden, but for Norway, they have the square feet, and this can be found mostly in the south, but can be found throughout Norway. And for Sweden, they have much longer stride length, they have both sexes, and they also have shoes on. I haven't mentioned Faroes here, but Faroes can have an identical pedestrian crossing sign to Denmark, but they also have a pedestrian sign with 6 zebras. And it could be confused with Iceland if you're a beginner. Like I mentioned before, the main way to separate the two is Iceland has the yellow triangle. For the Baltics and Finland, which can appear very similar, the pedestrian crossing signs are very useful, and each one is unique. For Lithuania and Estonia, you have the 3 zebras. The difference between Lithuania and Estonia is Estonia has the head attached and it has no body stripes. For Latvia, it is the only Baltic country that has 5 zebras, and like mentioned before, it has that one stripe line, and it also has those really long legs. Finland has 5 zebras like Latvia, but there are no stripes, has a bigger head, and the stride is much shorter. France, Italy, Portugal and Spain can be quite hard to separate. First of all, Spain have 8 zebras. Portugal, it is the only one out of the 4 that can have a belt. For France, the head is much closely attached to the body and it has 5 zebras. And for Italy, the head is much further away from the body and also it has a much smaller head. For these countries, if it has dashes only, it can only be Belgium. The remainder will all have 5 zebras. But for Denmark, the character is not on the zebra and has a large head. For France, the head is almost attached to the body and the person is striding forwards with one hand pointing forwards. And you have Luxembourg, which has 2 types, one with a belt and the other with a neck. And for the Netherlands, that could be very similar to France, but it has thinner legs and arms. For Austria, Germany, Luxembourg and Poland, Austria only has dashes, Poland has the one line which is unique to Poland. Germany or Luxembourg can have a belt, but Luxembourg can also have one without a belt, with a side view, with shoes. For Czechia, Hungary and Slovakia it is quite difficult, but if you find one with a low belt, with no shoes, with the head unattached, it can only be Hungary. Czechia and Slovakia is very difficult because I think there is quite a lot of overlaps, so don't take the pedestrian signs for granted. But I found that the hat with the shoes was more common in Czechia, but in Slovakia you can have ones that has a normal belt. I don't think I've seen that as often or very rarely in Czechia, but that will need further research from one of you guys. So let's compare Austria, Italy, Slovenia and Switzerland. For Austria, you have the hat and shoes with the dashes only. For Italy, you have the very small head. For Slovenia, you have a bit bigger head than Italy, thicker breadstick legs. And for Switzerland, you have the hat like Austria, but you have the 7 zebras. For Albania, Croatia, Greece, Italy and Montenegro, they can be very difficult to separate. If you find a belt with breadsticks, it can only be Croatia or Montenegro. If it only has dashes with a head attached, it can only be Greece. If it has a very small head far from the body with thin breadsticks, it can only be Italy, San Marino or Malta. For Albania, it will have a bit of a larger head than Italy and also the breadsticks will be a lot thicker. Greece and Turkey can look similar at times, but the pedestrian crossing signs are very different and Turkey have the zebras whereas Greece just have the dashes. These could be quite difficult to separate, but for Bulgaria, Greece, North Macedonia and Serbia, Greece is the only one that has the dashes only. North Macedonia is the only one to have a belt. Serbia is the only one that doesn't have a belt with a head unattached. And Bulgaria has the hat, shoes with 4 zebras. So it's the only one that has 4 zebras, but it can also have the head attached with no hat, with shoes, and it is not completely on the black part of the pedestrian crossing. For Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania, like mentioned before, Hungary has a low belt, Romania has the thick breadsticks, and Bulgaria has the attached heads. For Bulgaria, Lithuania, Russia and Ukraine, a good way to separate them is looking at body stripes. For Ukraine, they have a thicker body stripe on the connection between the leg and the body, and the stickman is also thinner, whereas Lithuania and Russia is much more of a thicker stickman with a thinner leg stripe. For Bulgaria, the head is always attached. But yeah, that's all. I hope this has been useful since there was a lot of information of pedestrian crossing signs already, but I felt like there was quite a few good hints and tips for you to be able to separate more pedestrian crossing signs that have not been mentioned on videos or in the community as far as I am aware of. Feel free to check out the links. Thanks for watching, and yeah, I will see you in the next video.